CM 365, all about Carnatic music. You may remember the remark made by one of the Rasikas in a previous episode about how a seasoned musician can actually interpret a notation very beautifully and make it come alive. If we look at the methodology of learning music itself, we know that earlier music was never learned through notation, and it was on the Guru Shishya Parampara. The Guru taught the music to the student and he imbibed it only by listening. In fact, the Gurus used to shun this habit of writing down anything on paper, and it was a norm that they should only learn it through the oral medium. That is, only by listening they should imbibe the nuances of the composition or whatever the music is. But later on we see that the notation has come to serve a definite purpose in terms of giving a visual picture to the oral medium. Now, at different levels, how does this notation serve the purpose? Let us look at this before we try to understand how a seasoned musician actually gets to interpret a new composition. If you look at the Sarali, Janta and all these exercises, the basic exercise itself, you see that the notation helps us in terms of guiding us through how much or how many notes should be taken within particular avaratam. For example, if it is a Adi Talam and you put Sarigama and after the Lagu you put a line, vertical line, and then after Pada you put another vertical line, then after Nisa another 2 vertical lines, means that for every beat you take only one note and sing. So like that you see that the notation helps much in this area of even the basic Swaravalis. Now in the case of Geetam, we see that as I mentioned earlier, parallelly the Swaram and the Sahityam operate like the 2 tracks of railway tracks, they go simultaneously, they have to go in order to give us a picture of the notation. Now coming to much more complex kind of compositions which are more intricate, elaborate and lengthy, we see that in these cases the notation is probably only a framework, and to interpret it you must be able to have a sound knowledge of the ragam in which it is composed. If you don't have any clue as to how that Rajalakshmi is, it is actually impossible to interpret that particular composition correctly through a notation. For example, just a very simple one, if you take the Saveri Varnam, where if you didn't know Saveri, you would just sing that first swaram like Sa ri ga ri ga ri ri ga ri ri sa sa ri sa ni da. Technically you are correct in terms of singing it as a Janya of Mayamalagola, but then Saveri is not like that. How would we sing if we did know Saveri well? Sa ri ga ri ga ri ri ga ri ri sa sa ri sa ni da ga ri ga ri sa ni da. Or if you take the Varali Pancharatnam, the first line, Papa, Mapadapa, even that particular phrase. If you didn't know Varali, you just looked at the Swarasthanas, Pa, pa, ma, pa, da, pa, ma, pa, da, pa, ma, ga, ga, ri. You would sing it like that. But if you knew that Varali, the pa, ma and dha are intertwined and operate in the support of one another, you would immediately interpret the same notation like pa, pa, ma, pa, da, pa, ma, pa, da, pa, ma, ga, ga, ri, sa, ri, ga, ri, sa, ni, sa, ga, ri, ga, ma, pa, ma. So there, any notation, if it has to be read, a complex notation, for that knowing the Raga Lakshanam is very, very important for us to bring out the nuances of that composition in its right perspective. Now, if you look at unheard composition, where the mention was made earlier also by that Rasika as to how the notation helps to actually bring to light many compositions which are unheard. Here it is again also important that when you are looking at a composition which is very rare and which does not have any audio material to it, at that time it's important that you look at the notation and interpret the notation such beautifully, as if like you are getting into the soul of the composer and imagining how he could have visualized the song. I would like to give a small example here about how a few years back I was asked to render some very, very rare and unknown compositions of Muttaya Bhagavatam. Let me confess that I'm not very good at reading notation so as to interpret it really well. So I took the help of one of my dear friend, Dr. Baby Sriram, and she's really actually very well versed, I would say, in terms of reading even the most unknown and rare compositions in such a beautiful and exquisite manner. In fact, many people know about her, this skill of hers, where actually you see that I gave her that particular notation, and what was just a set of, or rather a group of notes and words, they all started bubbling with life, in the hands of Dr. Baby Sriram actually. And I could see how the notation was coming alive through her beautiful way of rendition. So, of course, now that also brings to a point that the notation is actually a set of notes, but then the musician, through his own interpretation, through his own insight, through his own voice, actually he is able to bring in so much life to the particular notation and give it that kind of, unimaginable kind of structure, which is very, very important. And this is also an example, I would say, about how the composition grows beyond notation to become a living entity. CM 365, all about Carnatic music.